Welcome to the Authority File, the podcast where you'll hear conversations with academic librarians, technologists, researchers, and authors whose work is laying the foundation for higher education's future. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this series, our guests discuss the intersection of generative AI and critical thinking, posing the crucial question, does GenAI help critical thinking or erode it? The general takeaway is a positive one, although there are many factors that must be established before we get to that point. And we not only examine AI's potential impact on critical thinking, but our guests apply their own critical thinking on how AI can be effectively frameworked, deployed, and used in higher education and scholarly publishing. And during this 4-part series, which is brought to you with support from Sage, we'll supplement our theorizing with tactical ideas for ensuring critical thinking is preserved and enhanced during the use of GenAI. Joining me are the author and tech philosopher Dr. Tom Chatfield, Dr. Leo Lowe, Dean and Professor of the College of University Libraries and Learning Services at the University of New Mexico, and Katie Metzler, Vice President of Books and Social Science Innovation at Sage. In this final episode of our series, we examine some larger scale issues, such as regional approaches to GenAI governance around the globe, how scholarly publishers are operationalizing AI, and speculating a bit on what campus-wide policies might look like as GenAI becomes even more commonplace. Moving forward, I'm wondering, how are you seeing institutions developing AI-related policy at scale? I know we've spoken earlier about, we're kind of, to ask a question about policy might be jumping the gun a little bit. There's still a lot of evaluation still to go through, and we don't really know yet where AI is, what direction it's headed in. But are institutions gathering key stakeholders together to implement campus-wide initiatives? If so, what do those tend to look like at this stage? And Leo, I'll direct that to you for start.
So from what I've seen at other places, I think they are doing that. I think a lot of the either presidents or provosts have set up these steering groups or task forces where they gather a big group of people from different disciplines. At UNM, we're trying to do the same thing with a steering group with especially people who have deep knowledge of AI, whether it's technical knowledge or, in the legal aspect or otherwise to basically form a advisory group to kind of guide us a little bit. And then a very big working group. Right now, we have at least 40, 50 people kind of, be part of that. And I want to open it up to even more people because I just want everybody to be part of that, to have a voice. And also so that each individual can do less work otherwise. So we set up many subgroups with many people so they can share the burden of the work. So that's kind of the idea. But the purpose really is just to raise awareness so that people are not afraid. Like Tom just talked about, some people are very anxious of, is it going to take my job? And we just want people to know that it's a technology that is very, very useful. So we want them to have the opportunity to learn how to use the technology to help them, help their own careers, help them improve. So that's the point. That's what I'm seeing at other places as well. But like I said earlier, no matter how wide you cast the net, there's always people feeling left out. So that's something we need to pay attention to as well, to figure out how to get those people involved as well. So communication becomes a very important aspect of that then.
Right. Katie, I imagine this is playing out in a very similar dynamic within publishers too.
So we are seeing a number of announcements from publishers who are most certainly thinking about how AI relates to them. I think there's sort of at least two sides to that. So publishers are looking either at how AI can help them to be more efficient and help them with operational elements, but they're also thinking about how AI can enhance their products. And so we've seen recently a couple of announcements, such as Springer announcing a author assistant called Curie, which will help non-native English-speaking scientists write papers more quickly. Elsevier have enhanced Scopus with generative AI to provide summarized views based on Scopus abstracts and to enable natural language queries. And most recently, they've introduced a concept map feature, which allows you to see concepts related visually. So lots of interesting announcements coming out from publishers. At Sage, we're looking at a number of applications of generative AI for internal productivity gains, really spanning across all of our departments and functions. We have some pilots running with Jasper AI in our marketing department and with Hum, an AI platform which aims to transform content and audience data into actionable insights and personalized experiences. And right now, we're really prioritizing experimentation and piloting as we all upskill ourselves and we continue to try and balance that risk with reward that we've talked about so much. So 2 weeks ago, we actually ran a hackathon with 50 of our product engineering, UX, and UI teams to work through 7 possible product ideas using generative AI. So over 2.5 days, we ended up with more than 7 working prototypes around things such as authoring assistance or things to enhance our search. And some of these ideas look really exciting. However, as we've been discussing in this podcast over the last few episodes, we're very aware of the very high bar we need to be setting for ourselves as a values-driven social science publisher to ensure that anything that we build, which includes AI, adheres to the AI principles that we've set out at Sage. So we've actually set out some principles to guide all of our work around AI. We want to foster knowledge sharing and open collaboration. We want to promote innovation and experimentation. We want to make sure that whatever we do, we're providing customer centric solutions, whether that customer is internal or external. We have a principle around ethics and the use of generative AI, and we've talked about all of the different facets of ethics and generative AI use. Really important to return to that question of copyright and how we can safeguard copyright. And of course, we want to protect our customer and employee data. And so there's lots of great work happening across publishers. I think that there'll continue to be announcements all the time about what publishers are doing in this space, but we need to be doing it with that critical view as well, and to be thinking about how we're ensuring that we stick to our principles as we move forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Katie. As you've sort of articulated that, it made me think and wonder about, sort of responsibility from publishers around transparency in their sort of examination of AI, either internally or as a customer-facing tool. I'm just curious if there's been some deliberation around that at Sage or anywhere else at other companies.
Well, I can speak on behalf of Sage and say that absolutely that's been a key part of the discussion around what does it mean to apply ethics to the use of generative AI. And I think we feel very strongly that that means being transparent about when something that you're seeing is produced by AI and not by humans. And that means that we need to know how our authors, for example, are using these tools. So the guidelines that we've produced for authors make it clear that we expect authors to disclose their use of generative AI. And that's really important for us because we need to know what we're publishing. And we need the people who are relying on our publishing to do their very important work, whether that's research or teaching, to know which of the content that they're reading may have been assisted or generated by AI. And I will say that at the moment, there's very few examples of that in use that I'm aware of. So we do have our authors who are beginning to ask us about whether using generative AI in their submissions is acceptable, and we have these guidelines as a way of helping them to think about all of the limitations and all of the risks. But I do expect that that will change over time. And so I think transparency and being really, really open with our customers and internally with the people who work at Sage about where AI is in use is going to be incredibly important.
Yeah. Just one more follow-on question. Are you getting feedback or questions from your customer base are they curious about, how you're using it, or is that not coming through yet?
So I'd say we're definitely starting to get questions from authors. They're the main group asking us. And I think a lot of that is partly a result of what they are being encouraged to think about as they're engaging with publishers. So there is, as I've mentioned before, there's a lot of sticky copyright issues
Mhm.
here, and I
Yeah.
think it's really important that authors are being educated around what to expect of their publisher in terms of protecting their IP. And so we are definitely starting to have a lot of really good conversations with future authors, potential authors. I'd say we're getting less currently, probably less questions from customers. But at the moment, we're not publishing things that have been AI
Yeah.
generated. And so I think, were we to start to do so and to label things as such, which, as I said, transparency would be very important, I would expect those questions to come and for that to look very different. But at the moment, that's not where we're at.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. I'm curious about looking at this from a global perspective. What are some of the regional differences in developing governance and policies around AI? How are things going in the UK, for example, and how is that different than here in the US? What about Eastern and Western views and so on? Tom, I'll pitch that over to you.
I'm afraid I may not be able to shed, kind of profound light on that. I think one of the interesting general points I'd make is that I think there's a remarkable convergence around certain kind of high-level principles. People often talk about trust, about transparency, about truth, about intellectual property rights and copyright, and so on. And the interesting thing is the degree to which then what is actually meant by this and how they're sort of safeguarded and defended can differ from territory to territory. So in the EU, legislation is very much trying to hold the creators and operators of generative AI systems responsible for harms in dumb other systems and have very stringent powers, I guess, a kind of audit and accountability. The US is publishing very extensive guidance, which again focuses on harms, but in a different way, and on the sort of surface areas of exposure, and particularly things like development of biological weapons, invasions of privacy, labor law. It's a real hodgepodge. I simply don't have some overarching perspective on
Mm.
this. I think one of the worries, in a way, is that what you end up with, as we may be seeing at the AI summit in London at the moment, is statements that are kind of abstracted to the point of imprecision, with kind of words that sound good but don't necessarily have a precisely pinned mechanism, and then vast amounts of kind of talking shops um, going on, endlessly debating it and lawyering it and so on. This happens with new technologies, but in some ways it points to me to the unhelpfulness of treating AI monolithically, when it is, an absolutely vast, complex, and evolving series of computational fields. We may do better to focus upon things like discoverability, things like disinformation in the political arena and trusted information, things like copyright and IP, things like human labor, each of which has a sort of separately focused debate. So one of the worries for me is that there are some big abstractions that are agreed upon, a lot of debates that sort of play out, and measures that maybe potentially lack nuance. The stuff I like, personally, is in a way the stuff that is most precise, um,
Mm.
that is about kind of obligations on generative AI and other companies to have higher standards of data governance, to be accountable in very particular ways, for there to be limits upon particular identified harms and the identification of very particular harms, whether it's gain of function in viral research or the generation of undetectable deepfakes, and how we can try and protect trust and democratic debate and authorship and so on. Each of these is a separate global minefield. I'm not really answering the question. Um,
Well,
it is it is global though, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing. I think the thing is, you may ultimately need global fora,
mm.
which we're starting to get. But oh my goodness, the nitty-gritty of these things is going to keep lawyers in business for decades.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, I think you've put a point on it, Tom, and that's that we're still in the midst of it. So I think everyone's still figuring it out. I mean, Leo, I know you saw or you looked at the executive order that came out from the Biden administration around safe use of AI, and I just wanted to ask you what your initial thoughts on that were.
Yeah, it just came out, and just like the AI summit in the UK, I think it's going on. It's just finished. So there are a lot of recent developments in all of that, and I think Tom just used the word hodgepodge of stuff in there.
Yeah,
That's a lot of things, a lot of different areas, and I feel like I was able to focus a little bit on the education side. So
yeah,
at least they recognize, and there is some specific deadlines on Department of Education needs to start training or building up resources on AI use within 365 days. So that's a good start. But at the same time, a lot of there's a tension, I think, for regions and countries on innovation versus risk. So you want to make sure you pay attention to both, but at the same time, where's the balance? I think that's the key, struggle for a lot of these policies is that you want to keep advancing. You don't want to put in too many guardrails, but at the same time, guardrails are necessary. So where do people stand? So, but for the longer term, as they are figuring it out and they have their differences, that's where I see a little bit of an issue or challenge rather. Let's say EU is more strict on data privacy or transparency or risk than, let's say, the US. Doesn't mean that they will have different ChatGPT, for example, different kind of LLM over there versus in the US or versus in China. So I don't know. So one of the things I think some people propose is instead of following or just basing everything on regulations, AI sets standards. So it can be applied everywhere. So that's something that some people are talking about, but like the technology itself, these policies have to be agile and they keep changing. So I'm just pay attention to them as they come out.
right. All right, excellent. That's all the time we have. I want to thank you all for joining us on the program. You just heard from author and tech philosopher Dr. Tom Chatfield, Dr. Leo Lowe, Dean and Professor of the College of University Libraries and Learning Services at the University of New Mexico, and Katie Metzler, Vice President of Books and Social Science Innovation at Sage. This series is brought to you with support from Sage. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.